When I wrote this article, originally I titled it Why Western Black Relationships Aren't as Successful as We Thought They Would Be. Now, anyone who is an avid reader of my website, and you can access that in my ebook, will know my views on relationships. I'm for having no racial preference, putting no race of man on a pedestal, and engaging with whoever can enhance your life. But almost as an outsider, since I'm not so attached to black men as the average black woman, I can take the emotions out and see things that some black women won't admit to themselves. And a lot of people would think that we've been through a shared struggle and history as black women and black men, and so we should have some of the strongest relationships, but clearly that is not the case. There's so much resentment between black women and black men, particularly those in the West, since many Africans have long-lasting marriages, which is considered a barometer of success in our society, no matter what occurs in these marriages. And I want to share my ideas on why some of these relationships aren't working based on one core principle, and that is how black men view black women and how black women view black men. But before we get into the core principle, I'll explain some general factors that influence why many Western black relationships fail and just the ecosystem that makes it somewhat harder for us to maintain successful black relationships. Number one is choice. Choice means that as black people in the diaspora, we have the option to date other races, which may actually prevent relationships from forming between black people. And because of our past subjugated status, there's always this kind of desperation to date others, usually black men, as black women have been conditioned otherwise. But with other communities, even if they live in multicultural communities, they oftentimes don't have the opportunity or ability to date and especially marry others. I've had Indian friends tell me they wish they could date other races, but they have to date a Punjabi boy. And so a community like theirs even has Indian only dating sites because they have a caste system. And so there's a lot of pressure in other communities to date within the race. And obviously within the label, black people, there are different types: African Americans, Caribbeans, Africans. And usually in the African community, they were expected to date within, the race. But then black men started to engage in interracial relationships, even against their family's wishes. Even someone like Kobe Bryant, his mother was against his relationship with Vanessa because she wasn't black, but he decided to go against her wishes. And this creates an imbalance. Whereas in other communities, they usually follow what their families say. And so this imbalance came to a point where it couldn't just be black men dating out and then telling their daughters they can't bring this person or they have to date black men. And so the idea of telling your children you could only bring home a black person has been lost in many of our cultures. Two, grass is greener on the other side mentality. And so related to the previous factor, I think black people, especially black men, always think that the other side is greener. Even when you see black men tweet or talk, there's always this kind of other women are so submissive and great and they're this. And it's quite funny because back in the day, it was always white women are this, white women are that. And then they went out there and experienced them in quite large numbers, and which resulted in the most unsuccessful pairing. And then they realized, okay, we have to switch it up. Now it's Hispanic women are this, Asian women are this, and passport bros. And I think black men, and to some degree black women, haven't actually been in these communities 24/7. I recently saw a tweet by a black man that suggested that white women are submissive and they just do what they're told. And this is a statement many white men would even laugh at. But I think some of them believe it because they actually don't live with white families. They don't interact with Asian families. They don't see the dynamics behind the scenes. And so there's this always the other side is greener, the other side is better mentality. And when you have that thought process within a relationship with someone of your race, it's not going to progress, because when this person displays a negative trait, they always think that other races of women or men don't, even when they've never engaged with that community or the race tells them that the same occurs in their community. And this belief is a big issue amongst black men. They always think there's something better on the other side. Number three, lack of gender roles within the relationship. In a relationship or marriage, a lot of labor is required of women. And sometimes I think that Black women are not willing to do what is required of a woman in a relationship. And oftentimes this is because when they've done this in the past or seen others done it, they've gotten absolutely nothing in return. And they don't see the men they're with as worthy of doing certain things for. And I have written about this in terms of how it impacts Black women's femininity, and I may do a video of this in the future. But I'll see a woman and she makes a post where she'll say something like, oh, my man loves a stir fry, so I've been slaving away in the kitchen. And then the responses are along the lines of, sometimes she's a pick me, or I wouldn't be doing all that. And I'm thinking, but this is her husband. It shows me that some Black women are not willing to do what is required for marriage to be successful because they don't respect the men they're in a relationship with, or they have not been with men who have bettered their lives in a significant way. And I think a lot of Black women have never been in a position or been with a man where they can say, hey, if this man didn't come in my life, I would be at a lower position. And so I think the labor that is required of a wife, they don't want to do it because maybe they fear that it won't be worthwhile or they will not get anything from it. Because we do see, particularly with Black men, not so much other races, once they acquire money, and a Black woman builds with them, they oftentimes replace her. And we are also aware that Black men are confused about what it takes to be a man, a leader, a head of the household, and this is detrimental to the relationships they are part of. I think more online content targeting Black men should focus on teaching them what it is to be a man in a relationship as opposed to pointing out the flaws of Black women. And this factor is highlighted by the relationship coach Scott McKay. And although he alludes to single mothers, what he's saying is 100% applicable to most Black women.
I want to mention the most important part, and that's making sure you have masculine, feminine polarity in this relationship. And again, some people may argue with me, but see, Emily is a woman and she wants to be playful and fun and bring nurturing and comfort. And I'm a man and I like to provide and protect and feel like a hero. If we give each other room to do those things, not only do we both appreciate the relationship more, we appreciate each other more, we have more fun, and it just feels better. It feels right. And that never gets boring. Well, first of all, we're not in an adversarial relationship because of our genders.
For sure.
I mean, men and women are meant not to be from separate planets, but to complement each other. And in terms of the big picture of building a family or making a relationship, they really do complete each other. I know it's unpopular to say, oh, you complete me, because it sounds so dependent. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it more in terms of being complementary, not dependent on each other. Because, women want to relax. If any of the guys listening have ever dated a single mom, she's got to go to work. She's got to come home, feed the kids, lock all 7 locks on her door, and have a gun under her pillow to keep the bad guys at bay. She's doing the providing and protecting. And by the time all of that stuff happens, which frankly is a lot further down Maslow's hierarchy on that pyramid, all that stuff has to come first before all the feminine stuff like female playfulness and comfort and joy and nurturing. All that has to happen after you're safe and after your groceries are bought. And for a lot of single moms, that never happens. So when a guy takes her out on a date and actually invites her femininity to come out and play and gives her a vacation from that because they have a babysitter or whatever, my goodness, she just explodes like a Roman candle. So once you get into a relationship, if you back off and don't do your masculine end of the bargain, that's what's going to happen. What's going to happen next is women are going to start nagging you because they're having to carry the masculine, fix the sink and all that stuff and take care of the kids, and you're just watching football.
For Black women used to being alone, we are aware that many Black women in the West head their households. This is at a greater rate than other races, and so some look after their children solo. For many Black women, if there is an issue in a relationship, she doesn't have the urge to sit through it because of the shame attached to being a single mother, as she knows probably at least one woman or even her own mother who is raising kids by herself, and the kids seem to be fine and turns out to be a success. So you're not going to fight for a relationship as hard as maybe another race of woman who does not see many single mothers in her community. And on a personal note, the family I grew up with, that were very close to my family were a Chinese family, and in their community, there's so much shame attached to being a single mother. You and your child are almost blacklisted, and so that shame obviously means that a Chinese woman will be more likely to try their hardest to save a relationship or to endure whatever she's going through. And a troll once brought up the fact that the destruction of the black families because black women kept divorcing black men while other races who are getting the same treatment stick by their men. And I can't really say I disagree with him, because it's not all perfect on the other side. But I think that this falls on marrying men for the wrong reasons and not having the incentive to weather those storms that can occur within a marriage as a result. And this also ties into role models because a lot of black women don't seem to rely on a man. Even someone like Rihanna is an unmarried mother, and this is being praised by most black women. I think that makes many think that we don't need a man or commitment or it's not a necessity. So if we're in a relationship and he's doing something that bothers us, we assume it's acceptable to just walk away. And I'm not suggesting that this is wrong or right because it is important to consider the circumstances. 5, money. Money is one of the biggest causes of divorce, and I think black men don't understand that money is very important in a relationship. And the response is always, she's a gold digger, but they don't understand that a relationship is very unlikely to survive with money issues. I feel like many don't take the time to work on themselves or build a career before starting a family. It's just sex, 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 instead of thinking, I need to take the time to build my career, have some type of plan. So when I have some level of resources, I'll be ready for a woman and a family. And I remember watching a documentary and the Chinese men stated, Chinese women like nice cars and houses. And there was an understanding that they would have to work to get those things in order to obtain wives. And with most Western black men, there's this obsession with the idea of liking a black man when he has nothing, which oftentimes only applies to black women and not other races, even though most go on to unfortunately leave those women once they obtain wealth for a different type of woman. When you look at many non-black men who have obtained wealth, they typically met their wives actually when they were nothing, and when they were billionaires, they still sustained the same wife. And then you look at someone like Michael Jordan, who started off with a black woman, kept cheating on her with non-black women, and now as a billionaire, he's with a Latina. And you see this a lot, and I think people don't think that these things influence black women, but I do think they influence our behavior in relationships. And deep down, sometimes we know that if we build with a man, we may not enjoy the fruits. And so this is why the whole savage lifestyle is attractive to black women, because some of us aren't willing to commit, invest, or support a black man, especially nowadays, because they've seen black women in the past who've done that and have been discarded later on. 6, black men's needs. And so men of color have been subjugated in different ways. Black men are economically, socially subjugated. Even with Asian men, they've been stripped of their masculinity. And so when engaging with these men, you need to be aware of these things. And I think the advice black women get, that within a marriage or relationship, the man should constantly chase you while you remain nonchalant, don't let him know you love him, may not be effective for these type of men from subjugated communities, at least on the surface level. These men need praise, they need adoration, because society will rarely give it to them. And I think this is probably why white man, black woman relationships are more successful than black on black relationships in the West. And I remember my sister telling me a story. She works in the luxury space where she saw a black woman with her white husband. And my sister said the woman was like really rude to him, but he was still so adoring and obsessed with her. And you have to understand that due to white men's position in society, not everyone, but some of them, it's very different to the position of men of color. And I feel like with some white men, bear in mind, especially if they are quite rich and powerful, when they are with a black woman who maybe is not giving as much, she's not as adoring, she's not as worshipping, it's okay for him because probably just the novelty of her being a different race overrides these negatives, and maybe he likes the chase because he's in a society where he can chase, and 9 times out of 10 he will get the prize. However, I'm realizing that this is a dated concept for all men nowadays. going forward, you can see the growth of incels and G-Town. Men are very vulnerable and insecure. And I could tweet, I wouldn't date a guy who plays video games and have 100 triggered men in my responses calling me all sorts. They definitely need validation and adoration. And that is at least visible on the surface, even if you have ulterior motives behind it, like other races do, crossing green card. Especially with black men, if a man lives in a society where sometimes he can't get a job because of his skin tone, he faces racism. People even throw bananas at footballers and call them racial slurs. And these are men who have wealth and are meant to be respected in society. They don't want to come home and feel like this is also a challenge. Home for such men should be a place where these worries don't exist. 7, black skin means nothing. A huge reason I think Western black relationships are not as successful as we thought they would be is because I think many black women see a man, and because he has black skin, they think he has an understanding of her journey. But when we look at the kind of things that come out of black men's mouths, it's very clear that they don't. I recall on Twitter when a white Latina had box braids and black women were saying, we get fired for these hairstyles, this is quite offensive, blah, blah, blah. And then I remember a black man hitting back with, why do you guys perm your hair? Why do you guys wear blonde weave? And I was thinking assimilation, stereotypes, the workplace. But then you begin to see that there's no understanding from these men who we perceive as our counterparts. And a lot of black women realize that this man may have black skin, but he doesn't understand me or my plight. With a non-black man, I think a lot of us go into it knowing that he's going to need some teaching, and you're open to filling in those gaps because he doesn't have a black mother or a sister. But the reality is that the level of vetting that is required with non-black men, where you need to make sure he's not a bigot or gauge his perception of black women, is actually also required with black men, which may surprise you. Now, looking at the core principle, from what I've seen, black men look down on black women and black women look down on black men. Now, I think many of you will say, but black women are black male worshipping. Like, what are you talking about? But let me expand on this. So we have a dynamic where through porn, fetishization, and black women constantly putting black men on a pedestal, have more currency in the dating market. So there are more average women who prefer black men than average men who prefer black women. And I explore this in my video. And so most black men know that if he wants to sleep with a woman of another race, he can do that. She may not always be the most attractive or have the best values, but nonetheless. And we should understand that most black men are not really pro-black and usually only align with pro-black narratives if it's in their benefit or safety. Even if a man is with a black woman and he loves her, he's probably not dating her with the community in mind. And so we have a situation where there are many black men in unfavorable economic conditions, in prison at a greater rate than other races. And so the successful black man, or a black man doing anything productive, he's good looking, sane, has a good job, he knows that he's part of a pool that isn't the biggest pool in the world, and they see themselves as special. That's why someone like Future can have 7 kids. He sees himself as special, and so he can have 7 black women and women of all races. And we, of course, have contributed to them feeling that way. And for the most part, they are engaging with women, black women, who in their eyes, and even in the women's eyes, don't have options. Black women constantly put black men on a pedestal and cling to being undesirable. This may not relate to women who have leveled up, but the average black woman comports herself in a way that suggests black men are her only option, and interracial dating has not yet exploded. I assume it will amongst Gen Z, but for now, the black man, even when average, sees himself as a unicorn. He's seeing you as someone who doesn't have options. And so when that man engages with you, he may not bring his A game. And I've heard many black women say they go on dates with black men and it's like they're being auditioned for a role. From attacking them on social media for dating other races or constantly begging them to see value in you, or giving them compliments, you're the best thing I've ever seen. You've shown these men that they are the prize, and you've positioned them as the prize, which is very abnormal. In a normal heterosexual relationship, to position the man as the prize is abnormal. And I'll bring in examples where that works for some. But let's get back to black couple. So when this black man who sees himself as a unicorn engages with you in a certain way, he expects you to respond to that.
The main thing that black women miss the trick on is that black men already know that black women only date black men, generally. So it's like I'd say it's like a 90% split. Maybe 10% might date outside, 90% only go for black men. So that means we already know your hand. So we already know, oh, you need this, you need that, you need blah, 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 blah. But actually, you're only going to date me. So me existing, I'm already good enough. Not realistically, but I mean, as in you're only going to select from me. And there's no real way I'm going to lose you because you're not going to look anywhere else.
You know, I've been in black male-dominated spaces and seen so many say something along the lines of, I'll date a black woman, but we can get all races and they can't get anyone. And in a world where men are already oftentimes less emotionally invested than women, I think to myself, how can these relationships work where the man thinks he has options, but his girl doesn't? And we have to take some accountability for gassing them up in this way.
Men don't typically want to get married. Just understand this. Men typically do not want to get married. The only reason men really get married is because they don't want someone else to have you because you are the prize. If you treat them as the prize, they will never want to marry you because they see that you are not the prize. And no man wants to marry a woman who is not a prize. Okay? So treat yourself like the prize and something that they cannot have. Act like, oh, I just want to have fun and be, do exciting things and be spontaneous. And I'm not looking for no love, long-term marriage plans. I'm just out for, seeing what happens. Never romanticize a man. They're supposed to romanticize you because they can't have you. And they don't have you. They've never taken you off the shelf because you're single until you're married.
Men don't commit to women they don't view as a prize, and black men already have a hard time doing that with any woman. And because of our history of colorism, the media, our own doing, we have contributed to not being viewed as a prize by Western black men. And these issues affect all men of color in a white supremacist environment. But you have to remember that, for example, other races of men who are Asian or Hispanic don't have access to other races of women. And also, for example, an Asian man will go to an event, and even after internalizing white supremacist ideology, we'll see a white man with his women. And so many will still have to view them as a prize. But obviously, black women didn't get that aspect of the game. And so when it comes to black women's views of black men, a lot has been exposed in the last 5 years, like black men's earning potential, the rate of domestic violence in our community, certain statistics about their condition, and the constant degradation we see online, misogynoir. And so a lot of you may be confused when I talk about black women not truly respecting black men, but since most black women prefer them, but who knows if this preference is real? Maybe black women think they have no options. Maybe they just really want a black family and black kids. Maybe they're still, triggered by racism and would never want to be with men from anti-black cultures. And so we have black women pursuing black men, but not truly respecting them because they've exposed themselves to certain statistics and misogynoir. And I always say, when you date and marry a black man, you have to be careful about the narratives you internalize through YouTube and social media. You truly have to be ignorant and ignore certain things, because learning about their pathology and, their colorism on a deep level, or their role in our exploitation, will ruin your chances of having a successful relationship with a black man. You start to think, I'm an educated black queen, soft life, Princess Street man, he's lucky to have me because he's earning only 50K or whatever. And you're going into this environment not understanding that even when he doesn't look like Trey Songz and he's a regular guy, he looks down on you. And you enter the relationship looking down on him, especially if you've leveled up and you're successful. And this dynamic where both people look down on one another will never work. And even sometimes with white men, when they date women of color, black, Asian, Latino, they look down on them. But the difference is the women look up to these men. Latinos have a whole lightening the race concept. I even had a woman tell me her Hispanic friend, this woman's dad told her congrats on having a white baby. We know Asian women worship whiteness, white men, And some black women think, look, white men build for their race, they protect the image of white women. And so even if the man's looking down on them, they look up to these white men. And this is, can be a normal dynamic in a patriarchal world between a man and a woman. But what we have in the black community is two people looking down on each other deep down. And funnily enough, the reason why many relationships between black men and white women are not successful is because white women look down on black men. And I've seen non-black women disrespect their black partners many times, threatening to call the police, calling them the N-word, all sorts, and they don't respect these men. And so most non-black women, when dating a black man, she'll play the game. She'll give him the external respect because she fears him to some extent. She'll stroke his ego, by saying his dick is big, he's muscular, playing on the fantasies that black men have. But once he steps out of line in any way, you'll see very quickly that this woman is only with a black man because she thinks he'll put her above others. And when he makes a mistake, she'll quickly let him know, like, you are black and I am white, or above you in a sense. And some of the things black women say about black men, which I find quite dangerous considering the poor mental state of many black men, and then thinking that they're going to be able to date a black man while having that little respect is very bizarre. There was a very insightful article I read which said contempt, which is a lack of respect accompanied by a feeling of intense dislike, tears couples apart. Do you really think you can walk around and say, black men ain't shit, they don't have a lot to offer? You're going to encounter a black man who's going to change your whole view and look at you like the best thing since sliced bread is unlikely. I remember back in the day, I was online, and there was a black woman saying all sorts, even putting other races of men on a pedestal, which I hate and do not think is correct. And then we got into a conversation and she started to say, hey, it's not all black men, and she still wants a black man. And I was just sitting there confused. I don't know how many of you are watching my content, but if you still desire a black man, understand that this man will look down on you. And it doesn't mean like he doesn't see any value in you completely, but he understands his position in the sexual marketplace. No magical black man is going to come and change your thinking because all men are not perfect. And there's always going to be some things where he may fall short. As a black woman, if you've already associated black men with negative things, you won't be able to get past these small bumps that occur in a relationship. As a divested black woman, I'm telling you that if you desire a black man, you need to stop aligning with those that put black men in a negative light. You need to stop listening to content that speaks on black men negatively. You need to change your perception, and you need to be able to look up to these men. You need to find a way to respect black men. The reason why this article is more black women focused is because black men probably won't change anytime soon. As a black woman, if you desire a black man, you can't change non-black women finding them attractive. You can't stop their masculine media representation, the BBC stereotypes, or erase how many times black women have put their penises, bodies, and skin on a pedestal. You can't do that right now, so you have to change your ways so you can respect black men and play that role of a woman who looks up to her partner, because this is what all men crave. And if you want any chance of your relationship with a black man to succeed, and if this is not possible for you, stop dating them.